Hi, welcome back, everyone. Ignite your Phoenix Soul. I'm Anna Clint. We are here to heal our pasts, claim our whole selves, and step into our soul purpose. And nature is here to help us. And for that, I'm so delighted that we have Tigria Gardenia with us from all the way from Italy. Let me pull up your bio so I get this correctly. Tigria is a nature-inspired mentor, a personal evolution coach, world ambassador for plant intelligence. Her research focuses on plant neurobiology, plant music, social innovation, esoteric teachings, ecosystem thinking, and she helps multipotentialites like all of you and creatives and naturepreneurs confidently lead naturally conscious lives in collaboration with the plant kingdom. And I love that so much. Welcome. So happy that you're here with us.
Thank you so much. I am so happy to be here.
Great, 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 great. So I know we have a short segment and we're just going to get to scratch the surface, but tell us about how your passion that's inside of you that gets you out of bed in the day is connected to your soul archetype, which you also call your deep pattern. And so tell us more about that.
So from a natural world, all species have deep patterns. And these deep patterns are really exemplified through very, very simple rules that they carry out always. I'll give you a really practical example. Imagine a swarm of birds up in the air. Now we see these beautiful configurations, how they move, and we have to say, oh, who's the leader? And we think about it in hierarchical terms, and we think about, oh, they must have so many things that are going on in order to stay in that gorgeous configuration. But the truth of the matter is that all of those birds follow only one rule. That's it. To keep that swarm together, they follow one rule. And that's based on the distance that they have between each other. They have to keep a certain distance. And so it doesn't matter who takes the lead, the rest of the flock then pulls and follows in order to keep that distance. So these are these deep patterns. And the truth of the matter is that we as humans, being part of the natural world, although we forget this all the time, we also have these deep patterns within us. We have what are our archetypes, the way we do things. And the problem is that we get sometimes kind of pulled away from that archetype because we start to focus on all our passions. And I don't know how many of you have heard this before, but I know I heard it all the time, which is you have all these different passions. You maybe, I was a musician. I was also an engineer. I worked in the circus arts. I did body modification. I have studied esoteric studies. I was a Kabbalist, all these things. And people try to tell you, focus on one, right? How many of you have seen that, right? Focus on one.
Yeah.
You have to focus, right? Exactly. I see the hands going up. But the truth of the matter is that it's not, the passions are just the expressions of your deep pattern. Once you understand what your deep pattern is, what your archetype is, you can actually use all of those passions. You can see them as things, as tools you pull from in order to carry out what it is that you're here to do for your life purpose. So rather than looking at them as the end all be all, we shift the focus over to these deep patterns, over to this archetypal way that you do things. And that allows you to then freely choose from all your passions based on the moment. What is most important in that moment? Today, I'm going to be a musician because I'm working on, today, for example, I used my more artistic self because I was working on something. Yesterday, I used my analytical, more kind of organizational mind. The other day, I was then pulled from some of the circus arts that I had done for many years, and so I can pull from each one of them because what I'm doing is passing them through the filter of my deep pattern, of my archetypal self.
Oh, that's so great. It's so great. You are so connected to the natural world, but also really to plants in particular. How do our green and other colored friends assist us in finding and living our purpose? What have you learned from plants that we can apply to our lives?
Everything.
I know, I was going to say, but you only have a short time. We'll have to come back
I'll
to
have
this
a short
too.
time, so I have to focus it. When we look at the natural world, we remember so many aspects of ourselves. We as human beings have sort of forgotten that we are nature. And in that forgetting that we are nature, we have left behind a whole series of talents, of expressions, of capabilities that we have that in reality come to us, are what allows us to get into that flow. We were talking with Whitney before, and you were talking about, stepping into that flow, seeing those patterns. All of that is actually part of our natural selves. The plant world helps us reconnect to those by reawakening what I call our plantness, right? Our plantness is that part of us that allows us to, for example, see both the forest and the trees at the same time. The part of us that allows us to expand our perceptions, right? We think of ourselves as having only 5 senses, right? The sense of taste and touch and all of these, but plants have between 15 to 20 different senses, including our 5. Now, if I'm part of the natural world and plants have all these other senses, then probably I have all these other senses. And that allows me to step much more comfortably into the idea that I can expand who I am in order to use that more efficiently. So I can look at plants as models. I can look at plants as mentors. So I can look at, for example, how does a plant create an ecosystem? And what does that tell me about how I create community around me? What are the different aspects that plants are using, such as the different techniques and their way of exploring the world? How could I explore the world in a plant-like way? Because that is part of my natural self to better then create connections. Relationships is another really wonderful aspect that I have learned so much, and that all my students and clients work with so much, because we tend to think of relationships as in, we're friends, we're lovers, we're family. Like we have these designations based on who the person is. But plants look at it slightly different. They're like, okay, are you today a parasite? And if so, how do I deal with a parasite in a positive way? Because all relationships can be positive. So maybe I have excess to give and you need to take that right now. So I'm going to give. But the plant world also teaches us that if that person takes too much, or that other being takes too much, then you deplete me. Okay, so I know that I can give freely, but I have a limit as to how much. That relationship is positive as long as it lasts a certain amount of time. Why? Because the parasite actually keeps me in check too. Mm-hmm. So I can start to look at things that humans have labeled with negative terms and start to recognize that they are natural in the world. And therefore, if I look at it with a plant's perspective, how do I then function? How do I work with that rather than giving it a negative connotation and trying to get rid of it?
That's so brilliant, because what you're really talking about is balance and this sense of harmony, the back and forth, the give and take, this not just giving in one direction. There is this, it's reciprocity that what you're talking about.
Yeah. And even the word balance is something, a balance is one of my key terms. I mean, I love it. And at the same time, in working with the plants, I have learned the beauty of imbalance. Yeah. Balance keeps us static, keeps us always on the same plane, which means I don't really get to grow and move if every time something happens that's out of the ordinary, or that is in a direction that was unexpected. If I look at it as, no, I need to step back into balance always, well, then I don't explore that piece fully and I don't allow myself to grow. Where plants, any mutation, and plants are the best example of this, because we see this a little less in the animal kingdom. We see it a lot in the plant world. In the plant world, you could have one species that all of a sudden tomorrow starts to put out a new color and the leaf pattern starts to change. And we think of this as positive. We're like, whoa, the plant's mutating. It's turning into a new species right before our eyes. But when we do that, when we start to act outside of the norm, when we have certain capabilities like neurodivergence that is outside of the norm, we immediately try to label it as something we have to fix. Right. Well, if we take a plant approach, what if I don't have to fix it? What if instead I'm supposed to embrace it and I'm supposed to play with that imbalance to then, once I've played inside of that space, recognize what part of that needs to go back into a new shape of balance, a new level, or where do I have to go back? So plants really help us feel much more comfortable with the uncertainty, with the idea of moving into something completely different and looking at that with a positive spin, with a spin versus evolution. That's why I like you said in my title, I'm a personal evolution coach, because it's not about growth only, it's about evolving. It's about allowing myself to always become more the being that I am, to embody more the fullness of my natural self, to step deeper into that expansion that happens, and recognize that those limiting beliefs or negative traits or all these other terms that I can't stand anymore are actually opportunities to see the world through different lens, and then to expand from there and use that capability.
Yeah, I love that. I love that so much. What you're talking about is like getting to the edge of our comfort zone. And a lot of us shrink back at that point because we're at the edge of the known. And even if our comfort zone is really uncomfortable, what we can do, what I'm hearing you say, is take this advice from our green friends and about how to flow and move in those new spaces as we are on our evolutionary journey, because our purpose is evolutionary. It's never static, always changing, just as hopefully we are always changing and growing and not kind of staying small. And I just love that so much.
And that's exactly where that archetype fits in, right? That part that we were talking about earlier. That archetype is what allows you to see what is the way that I do this. So for some people, they're going to be, I'm going to give you a strange archetype, but that exists. There's the solar archetype, right? There's an element that is solar. That means that you do things by taking in that strong beam of light, by also being the light out. So the way that you explore these types of mutations, these types of changes is in you, is by bringing in that high radiation and really like allowing it to permeate through your body, and then expressing that back, right, out into it. So it's a high intensity way of doing things, but that's the way you are. That's your archetype, and that's the way that you express it. So others might be, for example, a container. What I do is I take things in and I contain them and I hold them, and I become this pillar that actually holds in place what is happening. Now, that doesn't mean that the pillar can't move, but I know that my job is to maintain a pillar. So that's no matter what role I take. I might be, like I said, for me, I might be in a circus one day, or I might be with Cirque du Soleil when I used to work with Cirque du Soleil, or I might be at Microsoft when I used to work at Microsoft. But if my archetype is a container, I know that part of my job is to be that place that I bring in what is happening, and I help hold up the rest of the group. So I don't try to stand on the top and balance for others, because that's not who I am. That's not my natural self. So I explore the world through that archetype. I allow myself to be unbalanced, and maybe in my containment, I might contain more than I normally do sometimes as I transform, but I always am aware that I'm going to be holding up some fundamental piece, because that's who I am as a container.
Powerful. So powerful. You in your bio, you mentioned this, like, supporting people in leading naturally conscious lives. You've been touching on this the whole time, but can you boil that down even more succinctly? Like,
Absolutely.
what your passion for a naturally conscious life?
So for me, a naturally conscious life is one where we liberate ourselves from our conditioning, and then we allow ourselves to make conscious decisions. The truth of the matter is that even though we think so much about free will, the truth is, from an esoteric perspective, we exercise our free will maybe once or twice in our entire lives. Because every decision we make, from how we go to the bathroom, to what food we eat, to the kind of clothing I wear, almost all of it, if not all of it, comes from some conditioning. Somebody taught you how to do that. And we very rarely allow ourselves to liberate ourselves from that conditioning by exploring. I use the example lately of the bathroom because it is so fundamental. Almost everyone learned how to pee by the way that their parents taught them how to pee.
Right.
And you've almost always gone that way. But the truth of the matter is that most of the time, it's actually not even good for you. Like, is that really the position that's best for your body? Like, no. Do you actually pee really well? Have you ever given yourself the opportunity to try different things? We mostly don't do this. And so therefore we are conditioned to pee in a certain way, regardless of whether it's good. How we sit in a chair, right? What's polite versus, now that doesn't mean that you should go out and sit however you want in a public space and, all these things. But the point is, if you never give yourself the opportunity to liberate yourself one by one from all this conditioning, you can never be your natural self because you've never tried it. So again, going back to that archetype, you don't know how even your body works, much less important decisions like, what is my optimal weight? What is the optimal way that I make a decision? What are the factors that I'm supposed to take in order to make a good decision? And more importantly, what is my own intuition? Because if I'm clouded by all of these layers of conditioning, which is what the plant world does really well, the plant world explores the landscape and then makes a conscious choice to go in a certain direction because that's the best direction for that particular plant, not even that species, that particular plant. We don't do that. We forget we're disconnected from all of those parts. So for me, and for the work that I do and my online community that I have, is the naturally conscious life is that systematic liberation in order to really connect to your free will, to really make choices based on what's naturally best for you, knowing the repercussions, taking responsibility for whatever choice you make, and feeling good about it because you know that it's the best choice for you.
That's so powerful. And that's like the fundamental, that's where we need to be when we're wanting to be on purpose. Is really, really attuned to what it is that this organism wants, needs, desires, and has the capacity to offer, right? We each have a different, offering, like the archetype, the sun, the pillar, the container, etc. And it's all unique and it's all perfect, but yet that conditioning, we're so conditioned to dim that light, to diminish whatever aspect of ourselves really is our most powerful, most natural. I love that, like really thinking about, and I love this idea that, underneath all of that layering of conditioning is your authentic self, your true soul self.
Right.
And that's partly what we're talking about, today, is about healing your past. And that's the conditioning, and claiming your whole self, which is really what you're talking about with the archetypes, honoring that this is who I am. This is what I was gifted with, and bringing that forward. And how powerful is that? And
absolutely,
it shows up in every single aspect of your life.
And it's interesting because we tend to focus on the things that are not working. So we try to think about whatever we've labeled as bad. But going back to the peeing example, that's an example of something that you probably are like, all right, well, that's how I pee and that's okay, right? But once you do this exercise, once you work with different parts of yourself to really come into, what does this mean for me? Like, I grew up in a household that you always peed with the door closed. You never had anybody else come in. You did it in this way. And when I realized how much seemed positive, but I was limiting myself in so many different aspects. I was also hurting my body because then I was embarrassed and I wouldn't go pee in public and I wouldn't do certain things. And I started to watch people that were just very comfortable with, and I realized I wasn't even comfortable with my body because the way I was taught had broken it, where bathroom was accessibility, not what my body was calling me to do. And the conditions of the bathroom made it that I had to go in a certain way, rather than, wait a minute, if I'm really comfortable with my body, I can I can easily adapt to the conditions of the bathroom. And again, I know it's a silly example, but anybody who follows me will know that I use the silliest of examples because they are so important, because they stack. They are the fundamental layers that we create upon. So we don't always have to just go back and look at the traumas and the difficulties. Sometimes we have to look at, am I working optimally? Am I naturally flowing in the things that seem to be going well? Or do the things that are going well are only going well because I'm putting up so much energy into them? I am not allowing myself to just, I'm wasting energy because I'm trying to get what works well, because that's the way I was taught, and it's supposed to be hard. And so we get stuck in this way of doing things. And it's just so crazy when we look at it. So, observing the natural world, we see that they optimize over time. Over time, they keep, it's a trial. It's looking at the errors. It's feedback loops. It is about stepping in and getting closer and closer to how it works for you in the best way until you optimize that. And from that optimization, then I can choose where to go next with ease. And that's how an old growth forest really grows. Like, you go from a what's called a first stage, succession, when I have the beginning of a forest, and then when it becomes middle succession, and then when it comes late and it's old growth, there's a continuity there. And that's when the magic of little sparks that change so much can happen.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's so fantastic. We have just a few minutes. If anyone has a question, this is so great. I'm super regretting that I can't go for an hour with all of our guests today because there's so much good stuff here. And so I think we might just have to do a round 2 of this whole entire day based on where we're at already. I found out about you because someone in my community said, oh my gosh, I just did this. Someone that I don't know, just on my mailing list, and we were having an exchange, said, I just did this, your plant music healing session with the spider plant. And I was like, excuse me? Do tell me more. And she said that it was really fascinating what came through for her and how you facilitated the experience. And I have not done it, but I really want to. And so I've dropped that in the chat, and it's a way that you can get to know your plantness by talking and listening, because I think it's a listening thing with a spider plant. So please, Tigria, tell us about it.
The spider plant is not just a spider plant. Spider plant is my business partner. Okay. I do everything with spider plants. Spider plant has been my business partner for several years, since 2019, I think, is when I first started working with spider plant. So spider plant and I work together on this plant music healing session where there is a device called the music of the plants, and it allows plants it's a musical instrument for plants. So it allows plants to make music. And during the time, especially during the time of COVID, spider plant came to me very clearly and said, I want you to start broadcasting my music to a wider audience, because I really want to share what I can from the healing perspective. I had always worked with spider plant up until then as a business partner. When I want to do my strategy sessions, I work with spider plant, I listen, we have multiple ways that we communicate. They're all things that I teach in my courses. And so when spider plant asked for this, I started to play like hour-long sessions of spider plant with the music. And I had already been working on an actual medical study about the effects of plant music on human health. So what I did was adapt the protocol that we had used. And so spider plant and I work on this plant music healing session that allows you to enter into a deep resonance with spider plant. And through the course of the session, you get to share with spider plant your experiences, what it is that you want to work on. And then spider plant is able to create music live for you, specifically for whatever it is that you're going through. My job there is to be the sort of one hands, because sometimes spider plant needs help with the device and stuff like that. But also my job is to be there in case if there's anything that spider plant cannot share with you through the music or through other channels. And so there are times when a message might come, and it's my job to like facilitate that. I also do botanical tarot card readings. And so I'll have my cards with me just in case that there's something that spider plant needs to share that just you're not in a place yet where you can hear it through these other mechanisms. And so spider plant wants to make sure that I get that. Other than that, to be honest, the session's pretty much Keys. Like Key does the majority of the work. I'm just there to sort of just be there just in case.
Yeah, you're the backup.
I am. I'm the backup.
Yeah. Thank you so, so much for being here today. You've got some love in the chat. Someone from your community has said that joining your community is the best thing that they've ever done in their 70 years of life on Earth. So this has just been just so fantastic. I just invite everyone to take advantage of this incredible offering. And I really mean it. I would like to do more and go a little bit deeper with some of these things at some point in the future. Tigria, thank you so, so much for being here. You're going to get more love in the chat. I do need to take a little break. So if you can hang on, and maybe if anyone has a question, drop it in there for Tigria, and we'll be back in our next segment. Thank you again. Thank you.
My absolute pleasure, and I look forward to, if anybody needs to reach me at all, my website, and as Lori said, thank you, Lori, that my community, the Naturally Conscious community, is the #1 place to come to have these types of conversations all the time.
Beautiful. Thank you.